Hello, welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and on Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. I am fighting with a cold, so this is going to be a very congested review. Sorry about that. I decided this month to take a look at a true crime, and this week features The Falsely Accused, making this week's book Waiting to be Heard by Amanda Knox. The accompanying cocktail comes from another book. I've mixed this up before, Mixology and Murder, by Kierra Sondereker. And it is a not your typical Italian summer spritz, which is 3 ounces of Prosecco, 2 ounces of Aperol, 1 ounce of ginger beer with an orange wheel for garnish. So let's do this. Most people are aware, even if only peripherally, of Amanda Knox's story, right? She was the American student in Italy whose roommate was brutally murdered, and Knox was charged and tried for her murder, convicted, then acquitted, then convicted, and then finally acquitted again. It really went back and forth. She's had a roller coaster of a life here, but through no choice of her own. And this is the story of what happened from Amanda's perspective. This is how she dealt with all of the craziness that was her life at this point in time. 3 ounces of Prosecco. 3 ounces of Prosecco. Well, that's right. Prosecco is a foamy, fizzy type wine. It's a dessert wine that foams and fizzes. This is poured over... Oh, shit! Well, I wasn't expecting that. That went all over the place. Gets poured over ice. Pour slowly. So in 2007, she is 20 years old. Her birthday's in July, so she just turned 20. And she approaches her parents about studying for a year in Italy. Now, like most of us that age, she's trying to find herself, all right, and thought that a year out on her own in another country, away from everything that was familiar, might provide her with a pathway to her adult self, which is not an unreasonable thought, right? That's totally reasonable. People might think that. Hell, I thought it. That's why I went to Germany when I'm not 20, how old was I? 26, 25, 26, somewhere in there. So that's not an unreasonable thing to think. So she went to Italy, packs her bags, gets herself enrolled in the local school she's going to be attending, packs her bags, heads to Italy. And she's not wrong, right? And not because of what happened to her, but that's a reasonable way to think. One needs distance from the familiar to find out who you can really be. It's why people who go into the military, they come back and they're all changed and super changed. Well, it's not just the military training. That's certainly a big part of it. But a lot of it is they're away from everything familiar, so they get a chance to find out who they can be without the expectations that family have put upon them. Yeah, at least I picked a good wine glass. Stir this up. Kind of an orange color, which is interesting. I'll put a little part of it in there. So she's very excited as she heads out to Perugia, Italy for her year abroad. And in short order, she finds a room to rent with roommates, Laura and Philomena. And then while Amanda is visiting relatives in Germany, the fourth room was rented out to British student Meredith Kircher. And Amanda has quite a lot in common with her. I mean, they're both native English speakers. They're both in Italy for a year to study the language intensively, about a year apart in age. There's a strong basis for a lifelong friendship there, and that's where they were headed when they met. And they were building on that. Like over the 8-ish weeks they lived together before the tragic events of November 1st, 2007, they had been building a friendly bond together. Just about a week before, so October 25th, Meredith and Amanda had attended a concert together. Now, Meredith left at intermission to meet with other friends of hers, but Amanda stayed and met with Raffaele Solicito. And Amanda, at one point, she can't help but speculate what would have been different had she and Raffaele not met. I mean, he certainly never would have been embroiled in the coming events, right? If she'd never met him, he would not have been Johnny on the spot and a target of the investigation along with her. But would Amanda herself have been a victim? Would she have been home on that night? Or would she have ended up going to work early instead of having work get canceled on her? Would her and Meredith together, if she had been home, been enough to stop what happened entirely? It would have just been, a momentary horror from which their friendship grew even stronger. I mean, no one's ever going to know, right? And what ifs are only going to drive you crazy. You cannot change the past. Amanda and Raffaele did meet and were instantly smitten with each other, rapidly spending every moment together. So Amanda was at his house on November 1st, 2007, as they talked about travel plans for the long weekend. He wanted to take her out of town. That's not bad. Aperol tends to be a real bitterant. But the ginger beer and the Prosecco offset that nicely, so that's got some good flavor. Probably had better flavor if I wasn't, dealing with a cold. Now, on November 2nd, Amanda went home for a quick shower and to grab a mop. Raphaela's sink had flooded the night before, and she said, no problem, I've got a mop at home. I'll bring it back with me tomorrow. And when she got there, Amanda noticed the door was open, which was not necessarily unusual because the lock had not been working properly. She noticed a few other things. She noticed some drops of blood, which she wasn't sure if she had maybe started her period, although the blood was dry, and when she noticed that, she became concerned, because Meredith was a fastidious housekeeper. So, I mean, especially in the common areas like the bathroom where blood was found. So she's like, okay, well, if the blood's dry, that's creepy. So with that spooky thought, she quickly got dressed, returned to Raphaela's, and said, hey, something weird is going on at my house. Will you come back with me? And he did. And the police were called, and from there, Amanda kind of fell through the looking glass into this absolute bizarro world of speculation and small-town mentality. Like, the reason I read Franz Kafka's The Trial last week is because I had read or heard somewhere that no matter what the protagonist, Joseph K., said, it was twisted to showcase his guilt. I didn't catch that from the book, but holy hell was it present in Amanda Knox's story. I mean, this was a truly Kafka-esque situation she found herself in. Now, Knox was brutally self-reflective about how naive she was with the police. And I think that she was unfair to herself in that respect. Most people try to cooperate with the police. I mean, we're all raised that police are there to help. I was a criminal justice major. I know how deceptive police can be. I remember, I'll see if I can find it and link it, the video of a prosecutor who said, if you're ever arrested, get a lawyer, because no matter what you say, the police can twist it to fit their narrative. Right? It was very specific. It was an eye-opening, YouTube video. It's entirely possible that I would have fallen into the same traps Amanda did. Why? Well, I distinctly remember in one of my classes, I could literally picture the professor in my head saying this, right? We were discussing how criminal justice works around the world, and where America is adversarial, Europe is cooperative with quotes, right? Amanda even references that Italian criminal justice was supposed to be cooperative, meaning everybody works together to find out who did it. Reading through her lived experiences, it was decidedly less than advertised. A lot less cooperation, a lot more, we're right, and you're going to jail. I mean, her lawyer at one point succinctly spelled it out for her. Quote, these are small-town detectives. They chase after local drug dealers and foreigners without visas. They don't know how to conduct a murder investigation correctly. Plus, they're bullies. To admit fault is to admit that they're not good at their jobs. They suspected you because you behaved differently than the others. They stuck with it because they couldn't afford to be wrong. That sums up the investigation. Right? Oh, end quote. All right. Amanda wasn't reacting the way police thought that she should, so she was seen as suspicious. I mean, basically, cultural differences sunk her. How delightful is that? Hoping the alcohol kills this, whatever this is. Now, where I personally might have stopped cooperation was when they wanted to interview me a second time. Like, giving a statement to the police the first time, that's natural, right? Even though all of her roommates lawyered up instantly, which tells me they were well aware of just how corrupt and fucked the police in their local town could be. That might have given me pause. At the very least, she should have called the U.S. Embassy, which she's aware of. Like, hindsight being 20/20, she's like, yeah, I should have called the embassy. Her aunt had urged her to do that and highlight, again, no, she should have. But she wanted to be helpful, right? Her friend had just been murdered, and she wanted the police to catch whoever had done this, never realizing that they thought they already had. They did, incidentally, ultimately catch the guy. I mean, like, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Rudy Getty served 16 years. Because he, on appeal, got his sentence reduced from life, which was 30, to 16 years. And they know he did it. His DNA was all over the place. He even confessed to it, although for malice, spite, because he's an asshole, because he didn't want it to be just him. For whatever reason, he kept claiming that Amanda and Raffaele were there, even though they never were. Throughout the book, she introduces some alarming statistics. Something like 95% of trials in Italy result in conviction. Of those convictions, 50% are overturned. Isn't that fucking crazy? I mean, if that's the overturn rate, maybe you should overhaul your criminal justice system. And if you think that's crazy, it's not like America's doing much better. We seriously aren't. We also have an absurdly high conviction rate because most people tend to assume that if the police have arrested somebody, they've done something wrong, despite that literally not being the case. She references a book, which did I buy it? Yeah, I bought it. I quickly bought it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to squish this in somewhere. By professor who, what's his name? Cassin? He looks at the statistics of false confessions and breaks down psychologically how and why they happen. And she uses that to explain how and why she herself fell into it. And she did. And I get it. I totally get it, right? It's one of the reasons sleep deprivation is against the Geneva Conventions for, war crimes. But it's not against police interrogation techniques. That's still allowed. And in Italy, they were able to overturn her conviction on a second look at the evidence. So they looked at the evidence, said, yeah, there's not enough here, we're going to acquit you. In America, that's not the case. In America, we're only going to set aside a conviction if there's a procedural error or absolute proof of innocence, like somebody else steps forward and literally confesses to it, or DNA evidence doesn't match. That's how most people on the Innocence Project are found innocent and let free, is they actually get around to testing the DNA evidence. And the average sentence that somebody served is 14 years before we'll release them here in America. Absolutely bonkers, the number of innocent people who are in fact in prison. So yeah, America has fallen from grace on this matter as well, so don't get on your high horse about Italy. Yes, it sucked. This was an awful situation. There's a lot of innocent people worldwide in prison. No country is blameless on this one. Now for Amanda, all right, I'm going to step off the soapbox now and get back to the book. For Amanda, after her initial conviction, her attorneys immediately got to work on her appeal, and she got a very good judge on her appeal, who saw the totality of evidence and did not support what the prosecution's increasingly bizarre and convoluted theory of the crime was. And Amanda and Raffaele were acquitted. And boom, bam, she's out. Like the next day, she's on a flight back to the United States. And I don't blame her. Now, I knew all this happened. All right, I had watched the news stories. I watched from America as the trial and theories unfolded, decided Italy was more interested in reviving the 15th century Inquisition that burned Giordano Bruno at the stake than justice. And so Italy suddenly became a no-fly zone, which is actually really stupid. I mean, you're far more likely to be falsely imprisoned by your home country where you spend, 99% of your time than by the tiny amount of time you spend on vacation somewhere else. But what was happening to Amanda was sufficiently horrifying. I couldn't even imagine myself going to Italy for a week-long tour of Rome for fear that I'd end up tied at the stake next. It's just absolutely bizarre. Like he was saying, it was like a weird, like the prosecutor was saying, it was like a weird sex cult, and Amanda was driving them on and making them slit her friend's throat. And it's like, what the fuck, man? Bizarre land. Like I said, fell through the looking glass. It was absolutely upside down. Now, all of that is to say that when she was acquitted in her book, reading her description, I cried. I cried when she was acquitted on TV and reading the book. I mean, her absolute joy screamed from the pages, and the joy her fellow inmates had for her, it made you cry. You couldn't not. It was such a human connection and moment. And then, of course, the tension when the prosecution appealed the acquittal, and she and Raffaele were again found guilty. She was in America at this point, but she has to keep apprised of what's going on because she could be extradited, right? Now, in Italy, the prosecution can also appeal a court decision. So there's one thing we got going for you here, right? Now, people think that once you're acquitted, you're absolutely home free. That's not actually true. If they find additional evidence that could support your guilt, you could theoretically be retried. Doesn't really happen much, but so people aren't aware of that. But you could theoretically be retried if new evidence surfaced that supported your absolute guilt. That's in America. In Italy, the prosecution appealed the court decision just as the defense did, so it went back and forth, right? And the prosecution wasn't about to let their theory of the crime go and admit that they had been wrong. And the prosecutor was a joke, though. I mean, I don't want to go into just how fucked up he was. The details are in the book, and it's going to horrify you as much as it did me. Italian courts believe, I think it was 3 appeals up to the highest court, and then whatever the highest court decides, that stands, and there are no more appeals, period. And on March 27th, 2015, the Corte di Cassazione, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, acquitted Amanda and Raffaele on all charges, which was a huge relief for all parties. And Raffaele, because he would have been instantly incarcerated with no hope of freedom. He's Italian citizen. He was still living in Italy. Would have been nowhere for him to go. Amanda was in the United States at this time, but Italy would 100% have requested extradition, right? We've got a conviction here. We want them to serve time. And while there's a good chance the U.S. would have refused to extradite, because she had some pretty heavy hitters in her corner on that one, she would never have been able to travel outside the country again because once she leaves the States, she could be extradited from whatever country she traveled to. So she goes to Ecuador to visit her friend that she met in prison, who also probably should never have been convicted and in prison, but that one Her friend, I think she said her name was Laura, had been convicted for drug smuggling because she had a suitcase with her that had drugs in it. She wasn't aware of the drugs. Her boyfriend vanished in the wind after leaving her with the suitcase. That is a not uncommon thing to have happen. Never accept luggage from a man you meet overseas. But she never would have been able to visit Ecuador and visit her friend Laura because Ecuador would have extradited her to Italy. So she'd have been stuck in the United States. Now, there's a lot of United States to explore. That's no problem, except you want that to be your only option for the rest of your life. They were acquitted, though. Not just found not guilty. Not guilty can simply mean there's not enough evidence to convict, not necessarily that you didn't do it. They were found factually innocent, which, of course, they were. And there was an absolutely absurd case. She never should have been anything but a witness. All right? Ever. It's absolutely absurd that this happened to her, but it did. I can see this would be delicious on a summer day. I just mix up a whole big bowl of this and have it for like a barbecue. This book was outstanding. I mean, I knew the outcome. You know, this is true crime. This was within my lifetime. I'm only 10 years older than Amanda, so I watched the news horrified. I watched the Trial for America. I watched the Netflix special, which came out in 2016. It was quite well done. For all of that, it was still edge of my seat reading. To get those details that were not provided at the trial or in the Netflix special or during her Joe Rogan interview, which was also excellent. And I read with slow creeping horror as we get closer to the date of the murder. I mean, just her optimism and naivete just leaps off the page and you're like, oh, honey, leave now, never come back. Because you know it's coming and there's nothing you can do to stop it. It's like watching a slow car accident. You know, I watched with frustration, with like frustrated angst, I saw the verbal trap she fell into with the Perugia police. And I shared her outrage over the prosecutor's bizarre exaggeration and twisting of the truth. Her sorrow and horror when she was initially convicted to 26 years in Italian prison, and cried for her when she was released. I mean, her voice is strong. Holy cow. I picked this book because Amanda has a new one coming out at the end of this month. I ordered it, but it wasn't going to be out in time for me to read it for this month, so I'm trying to pick a month to squish it into sometime this year. But I pre-ordered it. My Search for Meaning. I'll have to read it with other philosophy books, I think. I wanted to see how she was as an author, and I can report she is excellent. I mean, she lived through a horrifyingly tragic incident for which she was blamed despite being innocent. And, I mean, all she wanted to do was learn Italian and find herself. I mean, she succeeded. she learned Italian. She was fluent by the time her appeal came around, and she was able to speak for herself on her innocence. So she succeeded at becoming fluent and certainly found herself, but man, what a price to pay. I don't think even Amanda would recommend 4 years in an Italian prison as a means to learn the language and find yourself. I mean, a spiritual retreat a la, what's her name, the chick who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, that's probably what more people think of when they think of, I'm going to go find myself. Go do a ashram in India, not 4 years in an Italian prison. This is a very good book. I do recommend it. If nothing else, I recommend it as a reason for, as the lawyer himself said, if you ever find yourself arrested, get a lawyer. I don't care if they arrest you for jaywalking. Once they Mirandize you, you get a damn lawyer because they'll find something to pin on you. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye.